Welcome to How the Song Came to Be, where soulful songwriters share the stories behind their songs, as well as tools and creative practices you can use to bring your best songs or other creative works to life. I'm Anneheaton, your host.
What ends up happening is over time, the breadth of your life experience becomes your palette. And though you may not go ahead and write a song specifically about one instance, you will grab pieces of different stories to maybe tell a story, a whole unique story that isn't necessarily word for word or moment by moment what happened to you, but doesn't mean you're not pulling from the same honest, legitimate emotional source.
Welcome, songwriters. I'm Anneheaton, your host and founder of Soul Song School. I'm here with Tony Lucca. Tony Lucca is a singer-songwriter, musician, producer, and actor. He's released over 9 solo albums and 3 EPs and shared the stage with artists and bands such as Maroon 5, Sara Bareilles, and Mark Anthony. Tony is known for his time on the all-new Mickey Mouse Club show with heavyweights Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, as well as his epic performances on the popular television series The Voice. I know Tony as a very insightful writer, a super engaging performer who tours extensively and is now living and writing in Nashville. And I'm super happy that you're here today, Tony, to talk to us and share your wisdom.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to start the way that we usually start. I have a lot of questions coming to mind, but the first one is just how and why you got into songwriting.
Well, yeah, I think it was early on when I first started playing, and I had a cousin in Michigan that was much more like a brother than a cousin, and we both kind of picked up the guitars at the same time. We both came from a really large music making family, so we had members of the family that had different degrees of professional success, but everyone played and sang. And once we started playing and learning songs and it got really exciting, I think it was one of my cousins or an uncle who might have said, well, now you gotta write your own, and it was like, you can do that. It was like this huge epiphany. We're like, well, yeah, we gotta write our own. And so, we took right to it at like ages, I don't know, 9, 10, and started trying to put words to music and exploring different sides of ourselves. It was just, it all kind of came at once. And so I would like to say there was more of I remember when I did this and then I did that, and it just kind of naturally happened. I will say though that obviously it wasn't until later in life that young adulthood where there was a sense of compulsion, where I felt like that, people say like that inner voice or that the inspiration inside that was like, wait a minute, I can do this. I remember that I can do this, and I remember I enjoyed doing this, and this is kind of what I feel I need to do right now. You mentioned that I was an actor, and I have done some acting, but to be fair, I haven't in some time. But it was a major turning point in my career when, yes, I was doing the young Hollywood acting thing, doing television commercials, films and stuff, and worked for a while, but then went through a season of where I wasn't working so much, and I was doing more auditioning than actually working. And as much as I loved acting and being a part of that collaborative process, I hated auditioning. I just couldn't. I wasn't cut for it. I realized quickly that I didn't have the passion for acting that I would eventually have for music and writing songs. And literally one day I was at an audition, and I was auditioning to play some quarterback or something for a high school football team, and I was just like, the lines were horrible and the script was bad, and I'm sitting in a waiting room with like 6 other Tony Luccas, and on paper we're all the same guy. Which one of us is going to go in there and say this just differently enough to get the job? And I felt like I was wildly at the mercy the subjective process that I didn't like that lack of control or that lack of like, purpose. And I literally left that audition. I didn't even go in to read for the part. I just got up, I went home, and I remember just grabbing my guitar out of like nowhere else to turn. I grabbed the guitar and I wrote a song within like an hour time, just like knocked it out. The kind that fall from the sky almost. And it was just like this huge epiphany. I just sat there in my bed going like, well, that felt right.
Yeah.
That felt really good. That's what I think I need to do. And I really, that was a turning point. I basically told my manager, getting back to this music thing, I'm going to do this full time. I spent all my money on making my first album, and I never looked back.
I love that story. That's amazing. Yeah. Did you feel like it was partially that you had control over what was going to happen and it wasn't really up to anyone else? That's something that comes to mind. I also am wondering, reading those lines to be a quarterback and then you have no, and then being able to say what you want. I'm curious, like what was in that song, like that you wanted to say.
Yeah, there was a true sense of satisfaction, like instantly gratifying that, wow, I just took what was going on inside of me and I processed it in a similar way that you process, the actor process is that you're kind of internalizing it and you're telling a story somehow. But this was 100% my story. This was completely my making. This was my creative energy. This was, whatever would become of this song would be of my making or undoing. Like this was completely my creation, and it just resonated and stayed with me for a long time to this day. It still sits there. That is like the starting block of how I can weigh in on what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, and how I perceive the world around me. It was probably akin to like taking a really intense drug for the first time and deciding that you're going to be hooked on this drug for the rest of your life. And
we'll be back for this. Yeah,
it's a very healthy drug.
But yeah,
it was a life-changing moment for sure.
So I love that. Just as I was thinking about talking with you, and one of the reasons I wanted to invite you here today, it's interesting how I think it was your uncle. You said now you got to. Was it your uncle? Now you got to write your own.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like you had that available to you. Like this is just something you do. Like so when you wanted to come back to it, you were like, I know I can do this. But so you were growing up learning other people's songs. And when I was thinking about you, one of the things that I noticed is that you have like a really vast repertoire of other people's songs and sometimes unusual ones. Like you played, I think it was Grandma's Hands by Bill Withers at your Evanston Space Show. I remember that. And you have like, I Can't Make You Love Me on your website. So you've got, my sense of it is, you'll have to tell us, is that you have access and you know a lot of music. And then also, what I remember of you is when we played or you were on the Rock Boat. We played on
I was on Rock Boat. You went on the Cayamo.
On Cayamo. So there was a songwriters retreat just for the people listening ahead of time, where songwriters came to write. And I was working on this song and I couldn't quite get it. It wasn't quite there. So I played it for a few writers, including you. Yeah. And I thought it was about someone else. And you said something like, well, you're right. You're writing about yourself or something. I was like, oh man. And as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I am writing about myself. And I didn't even know. And so I was aware of your level of insight and observation, and which I imagine you bring to bear on your own writing. So I guess the question is twofold, like how you feel like that rich repertoire of music that you have has helped your writing, and then also, how this level of insight or how you develop that and how that plays out for you in your writing.
Yeah, I feel like songwriting is just it's a constant unfolding of the creative process, and I can't imagine, nor do I ever care to imagine, that it will ever not be that, like that it will ever, that I would ever know everything, that I would ever have tried every trick, or that I would ever seen every way to approach a song, you know. In fact, right now I live in Nashville and I'm writing full time, basically 3 to 5 days a week, writing songs with other Nashville writers. And man, it is just like starting over. I mean, I'm like, holy cow, there's just a million ways to approach it. And, you know, like I remember years ago, you know, getting back to your story about me sort of maybe pointing out that you were writing about yourself. I remember one time I was listening to, some friends and I were listening to Billy Joel's 52nd Street album, and the song Big Shot came on, you know, and he's talking, you know, the whole song is like, yeah, you went uptown riding in your limousine in your fine Park Avenue clothes. And he's painting this sort of scathing indictment of a person that just made a mess of themselves. Like, you totally, you know, and I always loved that song. You know, you had to be a big shot, didn't you? And my cousin was like, he wrote this about himself, didn't he? And I don't know why that wasn't so blatantly, glaringly obvious from the beginning, but I was like, he totally is writing about himself. Oh my God, what a cool thing to do. You can do that, you know? And like, yeah, wow, what a cool way to sort of mask the confession, you know, to veil the, you know, the vulnerability, I guess, the humility of owning up to your nonsense, you know? And okay, I'll tuck that one away. I might have to pull that one out someday and be like, okay, yeah, what I went through was a little too embarrassing to own it outright. I'm gonna just like maybe, you know, skirt around this thing somehow. So yeah, it is. It's just an amazing process to you know, and yes, the more that I think that you can sort of fill your creative coffers with just different styles of music, different genres, different generations of music, going back to the classics and understanding why the classics, you know, like I feel like I've been studying the Beatles my whole life, you know, and now my kids love the Beatles, and sharing the Beatles with them, I feel like I'm constantly revisiting the creative process just on a daily dose of Beatles. You know, it doesn't take having to go off to college and study this stuff to really sort of understand it and begin to integrate it into your creative process, and expand your vocabulary and your vernacular of how to write.
Yeah. And so what are some of the ways that concretely enters into your process? Whether, well, I know now you're writing in Nashville, and so could you maybe do a little like comparison of like concretely what that looks like now versus what it looked like before? Like if you were writing a song when you felt like it, were you just getting really into the emotion and journaling, or like just the concrete pieces?
Yeah, you know, like for a long time I didn't co-write. I never co-wrote, and because back in the day I thought it was because, you know, no one was as good as me or could write like me or could, you know, I don't want anyone else, you know, sharing in my storytelling experience, you know. Turns out, like, the truth of it was, I was just wildly insecure, you know, and I just didn't want anyone to poke holes in what I was doing. Now that I've matured and I've, you know, my body of work speaks sort of on its own behalf. Now I've readied myself for the challenge of how to do that give and take, and realize that, like, chances are my best songs are going to be collaborations, you know, that I'm going to find other people to help refine an idea, weed out the nonsense, and keep the trite things and the sophomoric ideas and the dear diary notions away from the paper. And that's a cool step. That's a big step, you know. And it really then it just becomes like, okay, instead of spilling your guts about a specific incident in your life, you know, or something that you experienced and you want to, like, I got to write a song about this. It just, what ends up happening is over time, you know, the breadth of your life experience becomes your palette. And though you may not go ahead and write a song specifically about one instance, you will grab pieces of different stories to maybe tell a story, a whole unique story that isn't necessarily word for word or moment by moment what happened to you, but doesn't mean you're not pulling from the same honest, legitimate emotional source to tell each frame of the picture,
Right.
and
Right.
and that's cool too, so it's less pressure, it's less like, um it's much less self-indulgent. It just becomes more universal when you're approaching
Yeah.
it from that angle.
Awesome. So I hear you saying three really great things. Like, first of all, learn as much music as you can, which is something that we say all the time, but I feel like it's always good to have that reminder. And then that you feel like your best songs may end up being collaborations. And even like, I just had a thought when you were talking. There was a song that we wrote on that boat. I wrote with Shannon and Beth that it had a line like "snake on the Great Plains" or "snake on the plains" or something. And I was playing it for my friend Natalia because I didn't feel like it was quite done. And she's like, that's a movie. Like, you need to take that line out. Like, she's like, as soon as you say "snake on the plains," I'm thinking of that movie. And I'm like, this is why I should never do anything alone, because I didn't see that movie. So I didn't know that, like, I'm gonna put that on a record, and then every time someone hears it, they're gonna be like, so. And
That's
then
funny.
I forget the last thing you said because it was so great, but I just forgot it.
Well,
Anyway,
he'll come
maybe
back.
I remember.
He'll come back.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
come back. Um, Shoot, yeah, I don't know what it was, but thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to go at it. Do you feel like it's harder to get your motivation going now that you're writing 3 to 5 days a week?
No, it's kind of become the opposite. Although I don't do much writing alone anymore, which is also something to be careful of, losing the freedom and your ambition that comes with doing something yourself, top to
Mm,
bottom, and making executive decisions in a song without someone else's input. That takes a lot of courage, and I realize that now that I've done so much co-writing. Like, okay, yeah, why am I, it's not just like I'm reluctant or I have an aversion to writing by myself anymore. It really is that I don't have the time. I'm scheduled quite thoroughly, and yeah,
right.
the creative process, though it's a bottomless well. It also, like, the functionality of getting your brain in gear to sort of to make sense of that organized chaos, time and again, hour after hour. It does get a little taxing,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been a really wonderful experience you know uh, develop that discipline, like getting into a fitness regimen.
Yeah.
After the first few days just suck, but then you get to a point where your body kind of needs that exercise. It needs
Yeah.
that physical
Yeah.
outlet. Now you've created this energy quotient that it just has to be met now. And so that's how it's become creatively.
Uh,
Like,
that's awesome.
I see guitars, I pick them up, and I want to at the very least come up with a riff or something, or a chord change that I can put on my voice memo and save for a future co-write session when we're looking for a chord change or a progression.
Nice.
or drum up song titles or just different ideas. I forget who said it, an author or someone, probably look it up, but he said, um, someone said, "I only write when inspiration strikes. Unfortunately, inspiration strikes every morning at 9 a.m." And it's just such a cool way to look at it. Like, well, yeah, I have a date with inspiration.
Yeah.
It's at
Yeah.
11 o'clock today, and I'm writing with Billy, Montana, or whatever, whoever it is. Like,
Yeah.
we have a date with inspiration.
Oh,
So
I love that.
that's
That's
kind of
so
cool.
awesome.
And you find that, like my first several co-writes were always just very awkward, because what do you want to write? I don't know. What do you want to write? What do you want to write? And it's like, it just becomes this awkward thing, whereas now I'll get into a session, and you can tell when you're in the room with people that do this,
Do this all the time.
that you just kind of get down to it, that it's
Yeah.
almost like there's no small talk, there's no petty conversation. You kind of just dial right into it, and then you have the conversation halfway through when you need take a break or something, or you're getting coffee, and then you can connect on a personal level. But otherwise, you're just kind of operating
You're
in
in
this
it.
like
You
really
just
cool
jump right in.
quantum realm. Yeah, it's
Oh,
cool.
I love that. Well, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you're never really stopping the flow.
Yeah.
Like you're probably at the grocery store thinking of.
Yeah, or you know, more so, I guess what it is I'll hear songs in passing at the grocery store, or you know, like be it an oldies or a hit pop station or something, and you'll hear songs, and I can even stuff I can't stand, you know, I can listen to it and break it down into its parts and its elements and understand what's strong about it. And though I
Mm.
may not really enjoy the specific flavor of any particular Kool-Aid, you know, I can admire the Kool-Aid and be like, yeah, that's good Kool-Aid. And I can see why a lot of people want to buy that Kool-Aid.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just remember the third thing you said. The third thing you said was how you don't have to necessarily tell the story exactly how it happened. You can pull different life experiences that
Yeah.
share like an emotional center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you know, I mean, truth be told, it's like there's only so many types of experiences that we're going to have. You know, you're either gonna like fall in love, you're gonna fall out of love. You're gonna have you know, there's the range of emotions: jealousy, betrayal, fulfillment, enlightenment. You know, like it's just really only so many things that are out there to experience, and you can't keep writing the same Dear Diary song, you know, or Here We Go Again kind of breakup song, or Silly Me, I'm Falling in Love Again kind of thing. You know, that after a while, if you've experienced those things, then you know from which to pull, you know, when you're tasked with writing a particular style of song, and it's not always going to be, you know, step by step, word for word, what you personally experience, but you
Yeah.
understand the realm of unrequited love, so you can revisit that if and when, you know, you decide you're writing about that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like it's more, the song will ring more true if you pick your examples versus telling everything, you know, because then you sort
Hmm.
of are highlighting nothing and then people stop listening.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, will you play us a song and tell us the story of how it came to be?
I will. Yeah, this is. I was debating which one to play. If I should play, you know, something that was more explicitly personal, or something that was more of what I was just referring to. But this one I just love. There's a songwriter in Nashville that I've been fortunate to write with quite a bit lately, and he's slightly older gentleman than myself, and like a mentor kind of, a respectable elder kind of guy in town, and I feel like just being in the room with him, I'm becoming a better songwriter,
Mm.
and I love that. But you know, we wrote this one, uh, you know, trying to, an idea that we've both visited numerous times, but there was just something so simple about this particular way of telling the story. And again, you know, there's little bits of each line that do reflect a personal experience, you know, that,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I remember that one, that's similar to the time I had that, oh, that was such a heartbreak thing. And so, you know, it just
And
kind of culminates into an integrity that you're able to maintain while you're performing these songs, you know, while you're getting behind them,
mm,
and sharing them, you know. But this one's called Might As Well Be Mine. Got your hair up nice, no, darling, don't think twice. Anyone can see, got somewhere to be. I see you call the cab, help you with your bag. Anyone, yeah, least that I can do. You're on your way, but if you feel it crumble, hear it crack, don't bother looking back, girl, I'll be fine. Someone's heart must break, it might as well be mine. Ain't love a funny thing? The songs it helps you sing. One day it fills your cup, next day it tears you up. There we were night after night, trying like hell just to get it right. Lord knows it takes two, you just couldn't see it through. If you feel it come, hear it crack, don't bother looking back, girl, I'll be fine. Someone's heart must break, yeah, might as well be mine. Here's to every kiss, how I'm gonna miss the way you smiled as you turned the lights down low. And here's to every time I held your hand in mine till it was time to let it go. If you feel it crumble, hear it crack, don't bother looking back, girl, I'll be fine. Someone's heart must break, it might as well be mine. Mm. Someone's heart must break, it might as well be mine.
Mm. Beautiful. That is so
Yeah,
beautiful.
such a tender little ditty.
Oh, and you guys wrote that in a room together in real time?
Yeah, it just was kind of like you get around to exploring. I find a lot of times, I used to start my songs off with a nice guitar riff, or maybe a melody and a line had fallen in my ear somewhere, and I'm like, oh, I want to write this song. And you come in and you start there. Well, I'm finding a lot of songs that I write now, you can actually sit there and pontificate about it. You could just actually theorize the song from start to finish, and especially like the country music kind of story based thing, where there's always like a first verse introduction to the story, and a second verse, ooh, and then that happened, and then there's some sort of twist or turn, and then the last verse you realize, oh, they were talking about this the whole time. And those are really fun, like jigsaw puzzle pieces to put together. And but yeah, literally, I've had songs where we'll sit there and talk about the song structure from top to bottom before I even pick up the guitar, and it's almost like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, we should probably come up with some chords for this song.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like you fill in all the blanks and let it all kind of settle into place, but it's just again, like that's just become the core of my passion for it anymore, is that it's always different, it's always unique, there's always a thing, but the one consistent thing is deciding that you're going to show up to do it every day.
Yeah.
And that you know
I love that.
that's a cool thing.
I
Yeah.
love the having the structure and the outline too, because it also writing into that, you can be super creative when you have, verse 3 is like, the big twist or whatever, where they find
Yeah.
out, like, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hanging out and spending
Yeah.
time.
Thank you.
Do you have like if you could share one bit of advice you would have for songwriters out there that has served you in your creative process? I know there's probably not one, you've given like 5, but
um I would say that whether you're writing as just a contributive writer to a particular song, say, again, you're writing with another writer specifically for another artist, or for a particular genre, or maybe you are a singer-songwriter artist and you're writing for yourself. Whichever it is, it's amazing how much easier the process can be when you know what you're not writing for. If you compare away like what it's not going to be, you'll be amazed at how easy it is to realize what it is, what it needs to be or what it
So
deserves
for
to be.
example, like what would it not be? Like
Well, I mean, to get really specific, you know, now in Nashville, you know, if someone wants to write a song and get it to Blake Shelton, for example,
oh, okay.
you, there's just certain things he's not going to say. Certain words are not going to come out of
Got
his
it.
mouth. But then you can get so specific as to like realize what his register is, what his key is, and so you'll
Mm,
write a song, and I mean, that's getting like down to the micro, you know, really breaking it down to specifically. But like, you know, I've been in some co-write sessions that have just fallen apart because the aim wasn't clear. You know, you had
ah,
one writer trying to kind of had aspirations of writing maybe a pop song that day, and someone else was just feeling a little more whimsical and folky, and someone else was just trying to like, you know, get something across the finish line, and to go in with a little more clarity as to what it is. From an artist standpoint, if you're writing as an artist songs of yourself, um, I can't stress the importance of narrative, of
mm,
knowing the narrative of like what your, you know, we all have umpteen million stories in our lives that we could tell and things we could write about, and different sides of ourselves. We all have, like, you know, we're all a little bipolar in some ways, you know, you write about your positive side or get dark a little here or there. But as an artist, you know, you want to, like, you could probably in one sentence tell me what Pink's next song is going to be about, or what, you know, like, you could give me like a sentence long synopsis of who Pink is as an artist, who Katy Perry is, or who Lady Gaga is, and like case in point, like Taylor Swift, you know, her narrative, she's always been really phenomenal at kind of reinventing herself through her own narrative. Sure, it's all out loud, it's out on Main Street, it's all on, you know, it's all tabloid fodder, and so she's had to kind of contend with that, and you know, specifically speaking to her new single, I don't know if you've heard it or not, but it's like, I think that's what has everyone up in arms about it, is that this is what she's chosen to do with her narrative, that everyone recognizes as having been so specific and true, that like that she would decide to do this with her narrative right now is, I think, what has everyone up in arms. Like
mm,
this, if
mm.
this song came from like Christina Aguilera right now, or Britney Spears, or someone, you know, people might not be so worked up about it. They might actually be like, wow, it's a good pop song, that's got a strong hook, or this is, I kind of like it, I like the beat, I like the thing, the video was awesome. No, with Taylor Swift, it's like she's just turned her narrative upside down, and
Mm.
everyone is like, ugh, you know. So, you know, like, for me, a lot of you know, my records have been very eclectic musically, but also story wise. You know, from song to song, I'm kind of jumping around a lot. You know,
Uh-huh.
I'll have like a couple really fun love songs, and then you know, a couple like total breakup songs, or total this or that, or then maybe there might be something that has a little politically charged element to it, and that makes for a fun listen, and interesting, and well diverse, and, you know, like eclectic and interesting. But it it makes it hard to sort of accomplish larger things with your project, in terms of, like, you know, the business sense, if and when you're going to try and market yourself and get out
Right.
there and put a record out. You want it to be cohesive, you want it to be like painting from a consistent palette, so that, not to be predictable, but it, like Beck, for example, the guy's always reinventing himself. But if you put on C changes, you're getting C changes. You're getting like
Right.
this thing that was just so unique and complete, start to finish, and there were no outliers on that record. It was a cohesive palette that he wrote from, and I think that's important to him.
Let me see if I can put this in my, so you are you, so basically intentionality behind your narrative, like intentionality behind the narrative if you're writing for somebody else, and then intentionality behind your own narrative. And then one of the reasons for that being, like, if I want to feel better from a breakup, how can I do that? Can I go to Tony Lucca? I don't know. I'm not sure. Like that kind of thing. Is that what you mean? So people associate the benefit or the experience that they're going to have because you've been so clear about your narrative over time?
Yeah, you know, I think that it's good to know, you know, where where you're coming from, and you know, and but that, again, that doesn't mean that like you can't all of a sudden sort of reinvent yourself and tell a different story, but it's like, if you were to compare it to a really good movie, a really good film, and maybe I'm speaking more specifically like in terms of putting together a body of music, like a record or an album or even an EP, and strangely enough, it gets easier if you do an EP because you're only dealing with like 5 songs of a statement, but like to go see a movie where some of the footage is shot in 72 millimeter classic film, and then some of it's shot on a high 8 and some of it's shot on an iPhone, and then they edit it together, and you're just like, what? What's happening here? And it's just a little hard to kind of just take it all in and really feel like you're understanding where someone's coming from. And so that narrative is really important when it comes down to like trying to encapsulate what you're doing and have some sense of consistency to it.
And that clarity, so people can really appreciate what it is you're making, because you made it clear and deliverable. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That's great advice. No one has said that, and I feel like that's really important. So I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for this. This has been a pleasure.
Good to see you, and thank you for that beautiful song.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you know someone who would enjoy or benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. Thanks so much. Much love.